just kind of want to talk to you. I was talking to a grower just yesterday, actually, about a harvest loss of $96,000 every time he goes through a cycle. And he has 4 grow rooms, cultivation rooms, multiple dry rooms, and trim, all because failing a total yeast and mold count, TYM, for mold spores that he couldn't see. So nothing visible. I kind of want to ask you how much these mold spores, contamination, may be costing you, right? So is this draining your yield, your quality, your ability to even deliver to a customer based on demand? In this case, this guy obviously had full demand. He's pre-sold all of his product for months to come. So the risk, and really it's about being able to control that exposure, right? The airborne contaminant exposure, surface contamination as well, are very critical to making sure that your mold spores don't hit you in the end, right? And end up with a loss. So I really want to talk about how AirROS by Sage helps growers be able to have a premium product, be able to use the product the way they want. So, and we can talk about how the mold loss might be, I have to send it to extraction, and maybe you don't want to, maybe you do want to, but we can talk about that. But ultimately, how we help growers overcome this invisible enemy, mold spores, in your facility that are caused by various factors, right? So we are the solution that helps growers provide that continuous protection, right? So like I was talking about with the hidden cost, you clearly have yield issues, right? Potentially total yeast and mold, whether you see it in the mold spores or not. You could have a reduction in yield. You might have to be adjusting your environmentals, right, in order to compensate for mold, which will affect your yield and quality potentially, right? Clearly, with a TYM or a mold spore contamination, you'll find that you have risk on your COAs, right? So now you have your COAs that you need to provide, and then you're not passing the way that you want to. Maybe you are passing, maybe you're failing, right? There can be both sides of that. Sadly, one of the growers I talked to was failing in a limit of 10,000. He had a 10,001 on 2 different batches. I mean, insane. By 2 CFUs, he was unable to sell that product as flour and had to push more to extraction. So when you look at the cost of that, like maybe in this particular case, he was an 80-20 split where he wanted 80% flour, 20% extraction. Technically, and I asked him this, but he could fail 20%, let's say, run it through an extraction process, doesn't get the yields out of it that he wants. Of course, there's factors to that, bad in, bad out. But in reality, he could use 80-20 split and be successful if only 20% failed. But in this particular case, he has certain times of the year that this happens more often than not. And unfortunately, just recently, that it happened that he had a 40% loss. And now he has to do a different split. Yeah, he can send some to extraction, but it's like a 60-40 split, right? 60% flour, 40% would go to extraction. We calculated it based on the amount of poundage, what price a pound he was getting for each of the extraction. We can obviously help with the ROI on that for you, but in his case, he was losing $96,000 per grower. And if one event, one bad month, affects 4 different grow rooms, it's what, $380,000 plus, an event. Well, there's far less better places to spend, or there's better places to spend your money in prevention rather than having to experience that loss. Mostly that hidden cost can, in his case, was not being able to deliver, right? So I want to kind of talk about how contamination spreads, right? So you have to think about this. And part of the solution is understanding this, right? You have to understand that total yeast and mold or mold spores will spread through air, right? Obviously air movement. And that a lot of people will compensate one way with positive or negative pressure depending on the environment. But air is a very big medium that, moves the spores. Clearly people, right? As your team comes in, processing, bringing tools, right? Tools is another way that it comes in. But there's a lot of avenues in which the molds will spread, right? And it's really in a grow application, you'll find that a lot of mold that does grow, once it's spread through the air or through tools, ends up, on a plant, right? On the leaf. Well, that plant then contaminates the next plant, right? It just jumps leaf to leaf, right? So this is how the contamination spreads. And then the next thing you have, instead of a sea of green, is a sea of white, let's say, like mold. Not a great thing to have happen, right? So kind of want to make sure that you understand really that the best way to move forward is action versus reaction, right? How many people only react once they see mold, right? You don't know it's there. All of a sudden, you oh my gosh, I see mold starting botrytis, I've got bud rot, I've got powdery mildew, whatever it might be. You're starting to see mold spores become active, right? Now you're visible to you. And now we react. Now what do? We put a bunch of people in the room, we start trimming, we start spraying, we start wiping, we start, there's a million things I've heard people do. Home remedies, of course, exist, as well as, professional or commercial chemicals. But also the other thing you can react is, oh my gosh, we have, and I never saw it, but my COA is like the 10,001, right? That they fail, right? All of a sudden now I have to do something. What do I do? Well, what are your choices at that point? You can only react, right? I'm either having to remediate in some way, hopefully not radiation, but a lot of people still believe in being able to irradiate product. But as the consumers get smarter to this and they want to get 5G free, they want to get away from irradiated or chemically treated product, your reaction lowers the value of your crop, lowers the output, the revenue that you may get. And so you end up with a loss one way or another. There's a lot of variables that go into ROI through labor time and other calculations we can, talk about. So when I'm talking about action versus reaction, or would it be better to find a way to prevent night and day, 24/7, with a sanitation solution that gives you that added layer of protection, defense against the invisible, right? That's really what you're fighting, things you cannot see. You don't maybe know they're there. So that it becomes really challenging. So you have to have the right solution that is attacking the problem where it's happening, right? And this, the way you go about it, ideally, and in most cases this is true, will not change what your targets are, right? You have a certain yield you're aiming for, a certain quality of product, terpene levels, flavor profiles, right? These are targets and ways you've been growing for years, potentially decades, and you have a practice that you're familiar with, but you don't want to react to every event that happens, right? So this is proactively finding a way to give you that peace of mind, the ability to, go to your, birthday parties. I've had people tell me, oh man, I can finally go to my kid's birthday party. I don't have to worry about stress over the weekend that my crop's going to fail, right? Those things happen because you've taken action, right? So what you have to think about is what most teams get wrong, right? We always, all right, so preventive, I've got to do something. I've got to check the box, right, that I've done something. I hear a lot, and these aren't bad techniques by any means, but you go to what you know. And the world of air purification and sanitation really hasn't changed much in 20 plus years, in the couple decades that I've been doing this. There's a lot of the same technology skinned differently. HEPA filtration, as filtration's been around a long time, HEPA is clearly the best filtration level you can get. And a lot of people can add HEPA filtration to their systems, whether it's a makeup air system, air conditioning, any of the additional, like you can add units of HEPA filtration to collect and filter out there. It's not a bad thing to do. Clearly, it's collecting mold spores and potentially viruses even. There's been studies that it can collect coronavirus, et cetera. It's a very good collection, a filter, let's say. It's not going to eradicate. It's not going to destroy anything, right? This is collection. The other thing that you've clearly heard of, and I'm not talking bad about any of these technologies, but UV technology clearly is a winner when it comes to killing bacterias and molds and odors and things like that. But the thing you have to think about UV, you can add it into your duct system, and it's cleaning the air that's coming through your duct, or you can add units on the wall that clean the air that go through them. But as we talked about earlier, where's the problem? The problem is invisible. It's plant to plant, not necessarily going always through your duct, right? The spore is not going to travel through a magical purifier on the wall and come back down and not hit the next plant, right? It's going to jump plant to plant. So UV, though it's effective, is a distance-based and a time-based application. So the air has to go through slow enough to be able to be killed, and must have enough residual time to kill anything that goes through the air. So it is effective. That can be layered tech. I've seen people use HEPA filtration with UV, as well as other NASA technologies, bipolar ionization. There's PCO and there's all these various names that people use for their technologies, but all of them kind of boil down to the same thing. And most of these, as you'll find, absolutely, what I find is crazy is there's no proof it's working. You may have a light on, you may know that the filter, you can see it, it's white, it must be capturing stuff, now it's brown, but there's no sensor. There's nothing to monitor the environment to really understand, other than maybe there's a particulate sensor. I've seen those where they can measure the PMI, or PM levels, not PMI, sorry, PM levels in a room. And ultimately, that's all you know is, I do have particulates in the air, right? PM10, PM25s, et cetera, right? But it's better if you can, even if you have these, that you can combine this with a whole room sanitation system, something that actually treats all the plants and all of the spaces, all the surfaces, tools, people as they come in, treats all of that to give you an effective kill against the invisible. However, I'd want to, explain to you how AirROS by Sage helps, right? The technology is designed to give you protection 24/7. As I mentioned, be able to touch all the surfaces when you're not there. When an environmental event happens, lights come on, lights come off, temperature differential, right? As humidity spikes, God forbid there was a power outage. I have people that have put our systems or the AirROS by Sage systems onto UPS or backup battery systems. I don't think that's a bad idea. But if you think about it, if the room was clean before the power went out, and you don't open the door, you're not exchanging air because your environmentals are off, no power, then the room is still clean, right? Ultimately, it's not a major tragic event. However, I can see doing that if need. But the room with us is clean all the time. So really, in essence, as the door opens and lets more air in, as people come in, as new tools come in, as air may exchange, if there's an exchange, that's when the invisible mold spore might come in, and I'm only handling the new event. Meanwhile, I've already cleaned the room, and so really it's only changes in the environment that actually cause problems that we need to help, right? So, and that constantly can come from, depending on how you're growing, it can come out of rock wool, can come out of soil. I mean, I've got hydroponic type growers with algae issues. There's other ways mold spores are entered into the facility, and those aren't the only. But ultimately, cleaning 24/7 is better than shock and then hope it stays clean. Shock, hope it stays clean, chemical-based, right? One thing that I don't talk about a lot, more so on my environmental side, we talk about resist this, right? Ultimately, the ROS is not a formula that needs to change, because the bacteria, molds, viruses, et cetera, cannot build up a resistance to the reactive oxygen, right? So the sanitizer is not required to have a new formula, new and improved, because resistance has been built. So this is a 24/7 protection that's going to work years and years into the future, right? Without any changes. Always we get asked for proof. Hey, do you have proof this works, right? It sounds too good to be true. And I believe it. I would say the same exact thing, right? I always want to know that first of all, does the science make sense, right? So ultimately, and we can go into more detail about this at a later time, but how does ROS work? Why is it effective? If it's everywhere in the environment, obviously it can be effective everywhere it touches, right? So we have a couple different case studies that we can talk about. For example, I had a case study from a company called Killer Green Buds that they had protocols to test PM, and when they were testing the PM using various chemicals and all that, they had a high-tech camera system that would be able to detect the PM even before the naked eye. So really amazing technology system in each of the rooms. Well, they were able to pull the protocols that they would normally use to eliminate the PM and powdery mildew and use just AirROS. And this study talks about what they did when they did this test, how they pulled the protocols, what the results were from the employees' odor. I know I haven't talked about odor, but the difference in smell and odor, et cetera. But how the results were on yields, were the plants positively or negatively affected, those types of things. And so this KGB study is a very powerful study that talks and shows the proof of being able to just use our sanitizer, the AirROS by Sage sanitizer, 24/7 without having to do other chemical type applications. Obviously reduces costs, right? We have other studies that we did with a group called Primitive, owned by some famous people.
Johnson and Rob Sims are teammates once again.
They both now are crushing it with their new company, Primitive.
Their cannabis company is in the early stages of their partnership with Harvard University and help those suffering from chronic pain.
Ultimately, they put our system in early and wanted to make sure that they would get passing tests as they were producing a good quality product with a good name. And in the process, I don't know, I would imagine this time of year, we're probably in the 80s, if not more, of tests that have passed with either non-detectables or extremely low. And so I remember at one point it was 30 tests with 27 non-detectables, but the rest were passing as well with very low. Maybe at time of they needed to do maintenance on the technology, on the product, on the purifier. But ultimately they get non-detectables and passing. And I know that we had somebody stop by the trade show booth this year at MJ Biz and mentioned that, hey, everybody talks the talk, but can they walk the walk? And then one of the largest grows, I believe he was in Arizona, and he basically said, I'm going to test it in a couple rooms. And he claimed 99.9999%, which like 6 log is according to what he said, but a 99.9999% reduction in the molds without affecting his terpenes, without affecting his flavor profiles. Like, it's almost too good to be true that he's expanding his facility with more and more. He didn't buy it all in at one time. He said, I was a little skeptical, right?
99.9999% has been resolved, so I'm seeing a lot of good results from it. I highly recommend it. In this industry, everybody talks the talk, but the question comes down to verifiable. Is it verifiable? The unit is verifiable, and I'm having good results from it.
So these are testimonies. You can find them available on our YouTube pages and other ways, but these are the proof is there. This works, right? This is real. We get asked a lot. I have a lot of questions I get asked about, we're in a greenhouse. We have high air exchanges. How can you treat the air with a small device? Right? I only need sometimes one purifier in a large room. There are occasions where we have multiple, but ultimately very low amount of equipment needed. But again, I want you to think about, if you're concerned about air exchanges or the air changes, that's where all the mold spores we talked about come from, right? As you're exchanging. Now, if I'm putting a curtain of sanitation, a sanitizer in front of that air as it goes through, it's sanitized. Even if I don't know, miraculously only hit a 90%, maybe even a 50% reduction. 50% reduction in mold spore exposure throughout the day of that full exchange is dramatic. That could be the difference between the 80-20 split that I was talking about earlier, or a 60-40 split, right? In passing and failing and being able to extract or have good flour. So ultimately, understanding the fact that our sanitizers in the environment, if you got dirty air or clean air, it makes a big difference, right? A lot of people obviously using sprays. And I'm not against chemical sprays. Obviously, if you can reduce that, there's labor reduction, cost reduction. Some of these sprays, even though they may be for pathogenic control, mold control, still can inhibit the plant yield. They can There's residuals. I mean, we obviously always test for, on COAs, you're testing for pesticides and metals and all those, everything the plant's been exposed to. So the more organic you can get with less and less sprays, less and less added chemicals, I think the better the product ends up in the end, right? So if you're totally, opposed to changing your ways and you want to spray, then you can continue to spray, but I challenge you to reduce that, all right, ultimately. If you have a very clean environment, congratulations, we've applied our technology in basements with wood and, plastic and duct tape and things like that with good results, right? All the way up to full commercial automated facilities that are 15 people run a facility that takes 60, right? That have that much automation and robot arms and all these various things. The cleaner it is, the easier, right? It's biosecurity is multiple layers of security, right? You don't want to show up in flip-flops and shorts when you should be in good PPE to protect your facility, protect your plant. So there's multiple layers of that. So a clean facility may see results even faster than a dirty facility, right? Than somebody that does not have good SOPs or practices. We like GMP practices, of course. Then, if you're already using UV and HEPA, I have mentioned it, prior, but obviously those can be complementary technologies. They're not going to compete with having something that actually sanitizes surfaces and the air and everything it touches, because UV is local, right? It's only where the air goes by. HEPA is only capturing. So they can be used in conjunction. You may not have needed to invest in that first, but if you have already, it's not a waste. Other people have talked to me about ozone, right? Shocking with ozone. And, most of the reports I get, obviously you can't have people in the room, but equipment destruction, oxidation of equipment and things like that, long-term seals and, if it's going through your HVAC systems, things like that, you can destroy coils. So ozone is very effective cleaner, but by itself, it takes high levels, unsafe levels, dangerous levels for various things, right? Definitely not for plant growth during an ozone shock, but for people at high levels and obviously equipment long-term. So a lot of these things are just hidden risks that you can avoid by taking action, right? Not reacting to the problem, even though maybe because you're watching this, you're reacting to a problem you have, but you're reacting with an action. You're deciding on the right way to move forward. If this sounds like the right thing to help you, that's what we're here to do, right? We want to help growers be able to get to a better position, right? So you can get to the results you want. It's easy. All you have to do is schedule a consultation with an AirROS by Sage grow specialist. We analyze your rooms and create an engineered sanitation plan for your operation. It is important to us to understand, and I always tell people, I said, I'm not a doctor, I only play one on TV, right? But tell the doctor what's wrong or we can't help you fix it, right? So if we understand better what you're doing, we can get you a plan that works for your operation in the areas of your biggest concern. So don't wait, schedule a consultation with us today.